everyone, and welcome to my webinar, Combating Misinformation. Thank you for taking the time to be with me here today. My name is Shannon Peterman. I'm an MLIS student. Today's webinar is going to cover tangible measures that library and information science professionals can implement to help the public deal with misinformation and to help stop its spread. I became interested in this topic when I experienced firsthand the divide that has been sweeping our country. And I realized through my MLIS studies that most of the information that's causing this is in fact misinformation. So today's webinar is geared towards LIS professionals, library information professionals. However, I have made it accessible for anyone that just wants to learn more about the buzzword misinformation or fake news. So let's get started. In today's webinar, you will learn what misinformation is, why it's dangerous, and the role LIS professionals play in helping combat it. We will start with definitions and what's at stake, and then shift our focus to staff training and individual patron interaction. Although library programming is an excellent way to promote information and media literacy, it is outside of the scope of this webinar. Oh, and if you're interested in delving deeper into any of the topics discussed today, you can check out the references at the end of the video. So what exactly is misinformation? It is essentially false, mistaken, or misleading information. It can come from an honest mistake, negligence, or unconscious bias. Misinformation can be spread when we mishear or misremember details, or we believe something to be true and it is in fact incorrect, and then we share this information. You may have heard of a form of misinformation referred to as disinformation, which is false information that is deliberately spread with the intent of deception. For simplicity's sake, we will use the broader term of misinformation in this webinar, regardless of intent. So, some key ideas to remember. Misinformation is not a new phenomenon. Quite the contrary. It is likely as old as civilization itself, and has been used as a tactic to sway opinions of the public in countless civilizations. A great example is the sophists of ancient Greece, that used their words to persuade for the sake of persuasion itself, and not necessarily because of their conviction. I bet that sounds familiar. Now, up until recent years, misinformation has been spread by people either through human error, or maybe human nature, or a little of both. But now we have an additional concern in the 21st century. Algorithms, bots, and social media. Oh my! Alright, so why is misinformation dangerous? Automated software has significantly increased the quantity of misinformation, and the sheer volume of social media outlets and participants have hastened the speed of transfer and the range of dissemination, all of which have substantial impacts on our global society. For instance, the non-human filters, algorithms, and bots select the content displayed on our social media, ads, and online platforms. This is done through analyzing our data from previous likes, clicks, and searches. Content we are then provided by this technology is continually narrowed, essentially creating a filter bubble where we only see information that agrees with our viewpoint. In social settings, this is known as an echo chamber, meaning a place where our opinion, or what our opinion has become, is echoed back to us. Another similar phenomenon is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to interpret new information as confirmation of our existing beliefs. So as you can imagine, echo chambers perpetuate confirmation bias. So, what's wrong with this situation? This type of information landscape farther and farther removes us from any intellectual debate or attempt to understand different viewpoints, thus effectively and efficiently dividing us from one another. Alright, so when I say misinformation is dangerous, I'm not talking about your friend getting mad at you because you accidentally told them the wrong date or time for an event. The stakes in that are low. Misinformation becomes dangerous when it leads to harm, especially when it endangers lives. For example, in 2016, when a 28-year-old man opened fire in a pizzeria claiming he was there to, quote unquote, do his own investigation into propaganda that was espoused with malicious intent. Or, in 2019, when a measles outbreak caused the governor of Washington state to declare a state of emergency. Measles, though once eliminated, resurged in the U.S. due to vaccine misinformation. We see this again with COVID-19 and the vast amount of misinformation spread that led to a distrust of a once highly regarded government institution. While human nature is partially to blame, the non-human filters, such as algorithms and bots mentioned earlier, have been designed, albeit by humans, to select content for us that continually narrows the information we intake, and this widens the divide between us. Additionally, research shows that our brains quickly memorize information that we learn, independently from its validity or source. So once learned, false information is hard to unlearn, and the repetition of false information increases its plausibility within the human mind and within our echo chambers. If you've ever heard someone repeat an outlandish news story but can't remember where they heard it, it's because our brains are wired in a way to remember the information, almost as a protective measure. But we don't hold on to the source as well as we do the information itself. This is what's dangerous about misinformation. Alright, so what are we going to do about it? Let's go over 3 methods. Deplatforming. While studies have shown deplatforming creators and disseminators of misinformation is an effective method for combating this harmful practice, this could go too far and be considered a form of censorship. What censorship is and why it's harmful could be its own extensive course. So all you need to remember for today is censorship is the suppression of free thought and ideas, basically leading to the society of George Orwell's book 1984. But not to worry. We don't live in the society of Big Brother. Right, computer? Right, China. Not to mention, most platforms used to espouse false information are owned by private companies. So that's another can of worms. Next is legal action. Okay, to preface this section, I am not a lawyer. I raised one. Well, an aspiring one. But I do not proclaim to have a law degree. Having said that, one main reason we in the U.S., and also Canada, don't fight misinformation with criminal law is because criminalizing false news abridges free speech. To criminalize the spread of misinformation would stop the spread of unpopular ideas. It could, in essence, freeze history into one acceptable narrative. Even well-intentioned censorship is still a form of oppression. Another reason we don't use criminal law to stop misinformation is it would be nearly impossible to enforce. We don't exactly have the pre-crime police division from one of my favorite 90s movies, Minority Report. Nor would we want it. We do, however, support civil action being taken against spreaders of misinformation. A recent example of this is the $1.6 billion defamation suit brought by Dominion, a voting machine company, against Fox News, a media outlet. You may be thinking at this point, if we aren't going to stop it, what exactly is our role as library and information professionals? It is my belief that we have a responsibility to promote the truth. And our best course of action is to do what we do best: educate. According to several studies, libraries are still seen as a reliable source of information, even when other institutions have been clouded in public doubt in recent years. Through providing education and open dialogue, we can prepare individuals and communities at large to combat misinformation when encountered. We can start by utilizing an information behavior framework that incorporates information and media literacy into the mission statement of the library, or as a core value. Integrating these literacies into the framework from which collections, outreach, and programming are built, creates an intentional foundation based on truth-seeking and critical thinking. This framework can also be used to help create a culture among staff that promotes critical thinking and advocacy for stopping the spread of misinformation. So, on to staff training. Periodic staff training is essential in many different areas, and combating misinformation is no different. For our purposes, I suggest a two-pronged approach. One, have staff check their own bias and information literacy skills. And two, practice reference interviewing and resource guide creation skills. So, in essence, teach critical thinking and self-reflection, followed by interviewing and reference skills. For the first approach, I suggest using the Informable app. This is a learning tool created by the News Literacy Project, which is a nonprofit founded in 2008 that is dedicated to teaching and helping teachers teach media literacy. The free app provides quizzes that help you learn to spot ads versus articles, distinguish news from opinion, detect faulty evidence, and identify fact-based and opinion-based statements. While these may seem easy enough tasks for people who work in the information business, I was surprised at how much more difficult it was to spot these on face value than I had thought. In addition to teaching information or media literacy to staff, teaching them to spot logical fallacies can go a long way in helping them think critically when helping patrons. So, what are logical fallacies? They are common errors in reasoning that undermine the logic of your argument. A master list of 145 logical fallacies was put together by the University of Texas, and the list of the most common ones seen in fake news was compiled by Golden Gate University. You can find both in the references at the end of the webinar. For staff training, I would focus on the Golden Gate University list. Here's three popular examples. Ad hominem, or argument against the man, sometimes called name-calling or personal attack fallacy. This fallacy attempts to disprove an argument by attacking the character of the speaker. For example, my opponent wants to increase EPA regulations. But how can you listen to someone who's been married twice? One thing likely has nothing to do with the other, and is only used to discredit the opponent. Another example is the appeal to nature. This fallacy proposes that if something is natural, it is automatically good, implying that something unnatural is bad. However, proponents of this fallacy often either don't define what natural means or offer questionable definitions. For example, I only use herbal medicine because it's natural, therefore it's good for you. Can you believe some people use antibiotics? How unnatural. This fallacy also implies cocaine is good for you because it's natural. Just food for thought. Wait, for the record, I'm not promoting drug use. Just common sense. And the last example for today is the straw man. This fallacy occurs when an opponent attacks an exaggerated version of your argument rather than your actual argument. For example, I think pollution from humans contributes to climate change. So you think that humans are responsible for extreme weather and have caused the recent tornadoes in the Midwest? What? Person 2 in this example is distorting person 1's statement and shifting the argument to an illogical one. To help you teach these lapses in logical thinking, there are logical fallacy teaching tools online. One I suggest is the Logic Shrink Game on Edutopia. In addition to teaching what logical fallacies are, have staff check their own bias by reflecting on when they have fallen prey to or used one or more of these logical fallacies, and what helped them to realize their mistake. This would be a good segue into reference skills, as they would have wanted to be treated with respect and compassion when they were on the wrong side of misinformation too. A great way to practice reference interview skills is to use role play. Staff can practice assisting patrons who are either seeking or espousing misinformation in a mock reference interview, where they can practice guiding the patron towards critical thinking without imposing their own opinions. It is essential that staff come from a place of compassion, sincerity, and as much neutrality as possible when assisting the public and each other. Because we serve all patrons, regardless of our personal viewpoints. And this is the number one priority. Engaging a patron from a place of condescension is not only offensive, it will make most people dig their heels into their beliefs. It can also tarnish the library's reputation as a reliable source of information free from bias, which could prevent that patron from seeking out important information in the future. Although it is my intent with this webinar to aid LIS professionals in helping their patrons see through misinformation, it is not my intent to shame others. As a wise person has told me, I can be led in the right direction, but not pushed. It is our job to gently and compassionately lead others to information that can better their lives, not push them where we want them to go. I believe if we retain this mindset, we have a fighting chance in combating misinformation. Back to staff training. When providing reference services, we can educate people in a variety of ways, including personal interaction during the reference interview, or by creating resource guides and information posters, and even by sharing these creations via social media. Library and Information Center staff come from a variety of backgrounds and generations, and all have something to contribute. An older library worker may be able to express the learning curve their generation had with technology, and how that learning curve can make it difficult to discern information from misinformation. And a Gen Z staffer could use social media to bring awareness of our differences and teach empathy, while educating the public on the pitfalls of misinformation. As we come to a close, let's review what we know. Misinformation is false information, either spread intentionally or unintentionally. Misinformation is dangerous because it can cause harm on a large scale. And it is our responsibility as LIS professionals to promote the truth, which is best done through education and compassion. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my webinar today. I hope you check out the resources at the end of the video. And I also hope you leave educated and empowered to help stop the spread of misinformation. I will leave you with my newest favorite quote from Alessia Kristova, a remarkable young woman who is currently fighting against Russian propaganda. When asked why the Russian authorities are so afraid of her, she stated, "In the era of the information war between propaganda and reality, words can get through to someone. That is why the authorities are afraid, because words are the most terrible weapon."
Artlist.io